Since then, the price of gold has risen to an all-time high of $3,500 per ounce. Also, I need to know, what am I to do? Gold looks too expensive when compared to other items in the world, such as food, clothing, a house, etc. Approximately where it ought to be. Therefore, it is no longer priced low. Also, it's not a solid platform for speculation. From here, it's plausible to expect gold prices to rise to $5,000, $10,000, or even $20,000 per ounce. This is Capital Cosm. Hi, I'm Danny. Here we are on August 28th, 2025. And today I am honored to have Doug Casey as my guest. It means a lot to me that you're returning to the show, Doug. It is a delight to be in your company, Danny. Plus, I am anticipating a pleasant and thought-provoking discussion. Yeah, I've already got a chance to show you the other side of the screen. We have already had almost 30 minutes of conversation. My friend Doug and I simply became a bit too excited. So let's simply press record and capture some of this awesomeness on film. What is currently on your radar screen, Doug? For the vast majority of investors, what should be the top priority? Listen, I've always had a philosophical belief in gold, but I know most investors don't share that view. In the early 1970s, I began purchasing gold at a price of around $40 per ounce. Even though I've occasionally purchased it for speculative purposes, my primary motivation for purchasing it has always been to save money. Thus, gold is now crowded. As much as $3,500 per ounce, which is a record. Also, I need to know, what am I to do? Considering how much other goods in this world, like food, clothing, shelter, etc., cost. In my opinion, the price of gold is too high, approximately where it ought to be. Therefore, it is no longer priced low, being a poor vehicle for speculation. You can now make a valid argument that gold will move to $5,000, $10,000, or $20,000 per ounce from here. A valid argument in favor of that. But however, as a means of speculation, it is no longer what it once was. All that gold is still with me. In the same vein, I have acquired a substantial amount of silver over the years, and I also obtained a fair amount of this. The problem with silver is that it is difficult to keep in large quantities, which is a problem if you happen to possess any. If you remember Uncle Scrooge's vault from when you looked at it, it was primarily silver. You should do the same with yours. Mining stocks, especially gold, uranium, copper, and nickel, are where much of my money is going right now. Even if they have begun to move, gold stocks are now trading at a historically low level when compared to other stocks. Their low price has astonished me. And I predict that they will ignite while continuing the work that they have begun, which they have completed no less than 5 times since I became involved with them in the early 1970s. Plus, the junior gold stock market as a whole will experience a 10-to-1, 100-to-1, or perhaps 1,000-to-1 decline, for the simple reason that I've been a part of one of those. You did state that, so are you implying that in comparison to the other mining equities, gold stocks currently have greater upside potential? You can say that, I believe. Also, as compared to other equities, deer stocks are as expensive as they have ever been by all conventional measures of stock price appreciation. The stock market in particular is inflated, but we've been in a bubble for a long time, and while it's not quite as risky as the bond market or really the real estate market, it's still rather risky. Everything is artificially inflated and floating on a sea of debt, and I think everyone is living in a fool's paradise. And if a sufficient number of individuals are unable to repay their debt, the domino effect will cause a domino effect of defaults, forcing people to sell their bonds and equities. Therefore, financially speaking, it may be a disaster, and I believe the likelihood of it leading to a financial meltdown is very strong. For a long time, they have been fairly high. Will cause a catastrophic collapse of the economy due to various factors. Additionally, I maintain and will reiterate that we are entering or have already entered what I refer to as the Great Depression, a time when the standard of living for the majority of people will fall dramatically. However, it will be significantly different and endure far longer than the misery of 1929 to 1946. Is this something you expect to happen in a theoretical sense or in practice? For the time being, it appears that they are hell-bent on reintroducing easy money. And as if it ever went away, President Trump is now vying for a 1% Fed funds rate, which would give him the authority to drastically reduce interest rates. He is now pursuing this. Would you mind telling me your name? This federal governor, Lisa Cook, through the employment of this person. Therefore, it appears that they are prepared to accelerate their expansion efforts in an effort to evade the debt spiral that has been rapidly approaching. I see what you're saying. I don't think it matters if we're going to be in a recession or a prosperous economy. Deflation or inflation is the question that needs answering. You can't compare the two. A deflationary depression occurred in the 1930s, which is why the word depression is often associated with that era. Additionally, inflationary depressions, like the ones that hit Germany in the early 1920s and many other countries recently, are also possible. My economic overview is so concluded. However, I say this not out of pessimism, but rather because I hold the belief that, with any luck, humanity will continue to rise. The reasons for that are actually not very complicated. Similar to how squirrels and chipmunks store excess food, the typical human being has an innate tendency to generate more food than they need. That's why saving money and building capital, which can be put to good use, makes the world a better and stronger place. The primary point, the second point, is that technology has been improving and speeding up at the rate of Moore's law since the Industrial Revolution. Based on those two facts, I can confidently say that our future economic situation will be unparalleled. Nonetheless, I believe we are currently seeing a severe downdraft, and I think the state is mostly to blame for it. For a long time, I adhered to the principles of anarcho-capitalism. In my opinion, the very idea of government is counterproductive. Consider it a predator. It works against the interests of the average person and against economic growth. However, the twisted belief that the government is benevolent and can fix everything is held by everyone. I see. Just to back up your claim, I'm currently perusing the newly released GDP statistics, revealed that the US economy grew by 3.3% in the second quarter, which was significantly greater than expected. While this may sound like fantastic news at first glance, what exactly is GDP? What is the main element? Spending by the government. The government's expenditure as a percentage of GDP is steadily rising, so the GDP is indeed increased. Has it grown more rapidly than anticipated as a result of the free market's natural and efficient distribution of capital? Or is it merely a matter of who we attribute the expansion to? Examples are the massive and aesthetically pleasing bill and measures to raise government expenditure. Doge and similar entities claimed they would cut a significant portion of the budget. It is evident that did not occur. Like you said, Doug, the state does allocate capital, but it does so inefficiently, and you may observe this in metrics like gross domestic product, GDP, which is obviously not ideal. My preferred perspective is that of the state as an extremely inefficient capital allocation. The state's output is often considered a capital destroyer, which is an accurate description. They are basically wars, pogroms, prosecutions, and just overall damage. Well, it does foster crooked behavior. Most corruption in society stems from it. As a result, I am unsure. It's totally up in the air. The time is also difficult to determine, but I will say this. There's an old adage that goes something like high-tech, big wreck, and it certainly applies to the current situation of the stock market, which is at record highs and is clearly experiencing a bubble. The bond market, meanwhile, has fallen significantly from its astronomical heights when interest rates were 0%. Interest rates, though, and that's risky business, anticipating interest rates. Most people forget that the United States government was paying around 15% to 20% interest on its borrowings in the early 1980s, when rates were much lower. The Federal Reserve, which by the way has to be destroyed, is within Trump's grasp. That's a whole other ballgame. Interest rates should be lowered to 1%, according to Trump, which, for many reasons, is foolish. However, in my opinion, they will return to the levels seen in the early 1980s. perhaps even exceeding 20% within the next 5 years. Moreover, that will affect a great many markets in significant ways. The bond market will be wiped out. The real estate sector, already drowning in debt, is about to take a major hit. Prepare yourself for that, I suppose, while holding on to your headgear. Yeah. Also, keeping with the theme of states, it was recently reported that Intel was acquired by the Trump administration, or rather the federal government, for a sum of 10%. Well, that wasn't sufficient. Regarding defense contractors like Lockheed Martin, Trump mentioned that he was interested in additional agreements like that, and even made a passing reference to the possibility of the US government purchasing these companies.